The rain was falling that Tuesday morning when Maya received the notice that would change everything. Her hands trembled as she read the cruel words printed on official paper. Eviction. 30 days. Welcome back. Tell me from which city you are watching me and what time it is there. Now listen to this story. This is a tale about a single mother who fought against a heartless landlord, never knowing that her salvation would come from the most unexpected place. A story about friendship, justice, and the power of a community that refuses to let one of their own fall. Maya Rodriguez stood in the doorway of her small apartment, staring at the eviction notice in her shaking hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have, each word cut deeper than the last. She had known this day might come. But knowing and experiencing are two completely different things. 7-year-old Leo was still sleeping in his small bed. His comic books scattered across the floor. His stuffed dinosaur clutched tightly in his arms. Maya looked at her son and felt her heart breaking into pieces. How could she explain this to him? How could she tell him they might lose their home? The apartment wasn't much. 2 small bedrooms, a tiny kitchen where the faucet dripped constantly, windows that let in the cold during winter. But it was theirs. It was the place where Leo took his first steps after Maya brought him here following her painful separation. It was where they built pillow forts on rainy days, where she read him bedtime stories every night without fail. Mr. Griggs had delivered the notice himself. His cold gray eyes showed no mercy, no understanding. He stood at her door like a statue made of ice and greed. His expensive suit contrasted sharply with the worn hallway carpet. His polished shoes reflected the dim lighting from the old fixtures. 30 days, Miss Rodriguez, he had said. His voice carried no emotion. That's more than generous considering you're already 2 months behind on rent. Maya had tried to explain. Her hours at the diner had been cut. Her second job cleaning offices barely covered groceries and Leo's school supplies. She was doing everything she could, working 16-hour days, skipping meals so Leo could eat. But Mr. Griggs didn't want to hear explanations. He wanted money. Cold, hard cash that she simply didn't have. The Pacific Northwest city where Maya lived was known for its community spirit. Tree-lined streets where neighbors knew each other's names, coffee shops where people gathered to discuss local issues, community gardens where families worked together to grow fresh vegetables. But even in this caring environment, landlords like Mr. Griggs operated like vultures, circling overhead, waiting for any sign of weakness. Maya had moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago, after her relationship with Leo's father fell apart in the most painful way possible. She had chosen this place because of its reputation for supporting families. The local elementary school had excellent teachers who truly cared about their students. The community center offered after-school programs that Leo loved. There was a small park 2 blocks away where he could play safely after she came home from work. She had built a life here, a modest life, but a real one. Maya worked at Rosie's Diner on 5th Street, the kind of place where truck drivers stopped for coffee at 5 in the morning, where elderly regulars came for breakfast every day and always sat in the same booth. Maya knew everyone's order by heart. She remembered how they liked their eggs, whether they wanted cream in their coffee. She smiled even when her feet ached and her back screamed from carrying heavy plates. Her second job was cleaning office buildings downtown. Maya worked there every evening after the dinner rush ended at the diner. She mopped floors in silence, emptied trash cans, cleaned bathrooms that office workers soiled without a second thought. The work was invisible, thankless, but it helped pay the bills, or at least it used to. The economic downturn had hit everyone hard. The diner reduced her hours because fewer customers were coming in. Some of the office buildings switched to cheaper cleaning services. Maya found herself competing with companies that paid workers minimum wage with no benefits. She couldn't match their prices and still afford to live. But she never complained. Not really. Maya was raised to believe that hard work and dignity would eventually pay off. Her grandmother used to say that honest work was never shameful, that providing for your family was the most honorable thing a person could do. Maya held on to those words during the darkest moments. Leo didn't know how close they were to losing everything. He was just a child. He deserved to feel safe and secure. So Maya smiled when she helped him with homework. She laughed at his silly jokes during dinner. She read him stories with different voices for each character. She tucked him in every night and promised him tomorrow would be a good day. But the nights were the hardest. When Leo was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Maya would sit at her small kitchen table and spread out the bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, Leo's school expenses. The numbers never added up. No matter how many times she recalculated, no matter how creative she got with the budget, there was always more month than money. Maya had tried to talk to Mr. Griggs before. She had gone to his office on Maple Street, a fancy building with marble floors and expensive artwork on the walls. She had waited in an uncomfortable chair for 2 hours. When she finally got to see him, she explained her situation. She showed him her work schedules, her pay stubs. She asked for just a little more time, a payment plan, anything that would allow her to keep her home. Mr. Griggs had listened with the expression of someone watching paint dry. When Maya finished speaking, he leaned back in his leather chair and shook his head. "Business is business, Miss Rodriguez. I can't run a charity. If everyone got extensions when times were tough, I'd be bankrupt within a year." He had given her that speech like he had rehearsed it 100 times, like Maya was just another number on his spreadsheet, not a real person with a real child who needed stability. Not someone who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet in an economy that seemed designed to crush people like her. The worst part was the way he looked at her. Like she was lazy. Like she was trying to take advantage of his kindness. Like her struggles were somehow her own fault. Maya had left his office feeling smaller than when she arrived, but she hadn't given up. She never gave up. After receiving the eviction notice, Maya knew she had to act fast. She couldn't let Leo become homeless. She couldn't let her son sleep in their car or in a shelter. She would fight this with everything she had, even if it seemed hopeless. That afternoon, while Leo was at school, Maya walked to the community center. She had heard about legal aid services for people who couldn't afford lawyers. The center was housed in an old brick building that had been renovated with community donations. Local artists had painted murals on the walls. Children's drawings were displayed in the hallways. It felt like a place where people genuinely cared about helping others. The receptionist, a kind woman named Patricia, listened to Maya's story with compassion in her eyes. She handed Maya several forms to fill out, information about her income, her expenses, her housing situation. Maya's hands shook as she wrote down the painful details of her financial reality. "Don't worry, honey," Patricia said softly. "We've helped lots of families in situations like yours. There are laws that protect tenants. Landlords can't just throw people out on the street without following proper procedures." Maya felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't as powerless as Mr. Griggs wanted her to believe. Maybe there was still a chance to save her home, to keep Leo's world stable and secure. The legal aid attorney assigned to Maya's case was a young man named David Thompson. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and wore a suit that had seen better days. David explained that Maya had rights as a tenant, that eviction was a legal process that required court approval, that landlords couldn't simply force people out because they felt like it. "We'll file a response to the eviction notice," David explained. "We'll ask the court for time to work out a payment arrangement. We'll also investigate whether your landlord has followed all the proper legal procedures." Maya nodded, trying to absorb all the information. The legal system seemed overwhelming, like a maze designed by people who spoke a different language. But David made her feel like she wasn't facing this battle alone. Over the next few weeks, Maya threw herself into preparing her case. She gathered every document she could find. Pay stubs from both jobs. Bank statements showing her efforts to pay rent whenever possible. Letters from Leo's teachers praising her involvement in his education. Character references from neighbors and coworkers. The community rallied around Maya in ways that surprised her. News of her eviction spread through the neighborhood network of parents, shopkeepers, and longtime residents. People who barely knew her offered help. Mrs. Chen from the corner grocery store donated groceries. Tom from the auto repair shop offered to fix her car for free. The afternoon storytelling circle at the community center organized a fundraiser. Maya was overwhelmed by the kindness. She had always been independent, proud. She didn't like accepting charity. But these neighbors weren't offering charity. They were offering solidarity. They understood that Maya's fight was everyone's fight, that if landlords could crush one family, they could crush any family. The fundraiser was held on a Saturday morning in the community center's main hall. Local musicians donated their time. Bakeries contributed pastries and coffee. Families brought their children and turned it into a festival of support. Maya watched in amazement as her neighbors opened their wallets, not because they had money to spare, but because they believed in doing what was right. She noticed a young woman helping at the registration table, someone she didn't recognize. The woman had kind eyes and worked efficiently, greeting everyone with genuine warmth. Maya learned later that this was Sarah Griggs, Mr. Griggs's daughter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the situation. Sarah had heard about Maya's case through her volunteer work with local homeless shelters. She had been quietly horrified to discover that her own father was the landlord trying to evict a single mother. Sarah had grown up privileged. She had never worried about rent money or where her next meal would come from. But she wasn't blind to the struggles of others. The fundraiser raised $800. It wasn't enough to cover all the back rent Maya owed, but it was a start. More importantly, it showed Mr. Griggs that the community was watching, that his actions had consequences beyond his bank account. When Mr. Griggs learned about the fundraiser, he was furious. He called David Thompson's office and demanded to know why his tenant was playing victim in public instead of just paying her bills. David calmly explained that Maya had every right to seek community support, that there was nothing illegal or unethical about neighbors helping neighbors. But Mr. Griggs wasn't just angry about the fundraiser, he was embarrassed. His business associates had started asking uncomfortable questions. His golf partners made jokes about him becoming the neighborhood villain. Even his cleaning lady had given him dirty looks. His carefully cultivated image as a respectable businessman was taking a hit. The pressure made him more determined than ever to win the eviction case quickly and decisively. He hired a top law firm known for aggressive tactics in landlord-tenant disputes. Lawyers who specialized in getting rid of problem tenants as fast as possible, lawyers who didn't care about sob stories or community fundraisers. Maya's court date was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early November. The courthouse was an imposing stone building downtown. Steps led up to heavy wooden doors that looked like they belonged in a medieval castle. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Everything smelled like old books and floor wax. Maya had never been inside a courtroom before. The wooden benches reminded her of church pews. The high ceiling made her feel small and insignificant. Behind the judge's bench hung the flag and a portrait of some long-dead official. The whole atmosphere was designed to intimidate people like her. David had prepared Maya for what to expect, how to address the judge, where to sit, what questions she might be asked. But no amount of preparation could calm the butterflies in her stomach. This wasn't just a legal proceeding. This was a fight for her son's future. Mr. Griggs arrived with his lead attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who looked like she ate tenant rights for breakfast. They sat at the plaintiff's table, reviewing documents and whispering strategy. Mr. Griggs kept glancing at Maya with the expression of someone who had already won. When the bailiff called Maya's case, she felt like she was walking to her own execution. Her legs wobbled as she approached the defendant's table. David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and whispered that everything would be okay. But Maya wasn't sure she believed him anymore. Then the judge walked in. A woman in her early 40s with graying hair pulled back in a simple bun. She wore black robes that made her look both powerful and approachable. Her eyes were intelligent and kind. When she looked at Maya, there was something familiar in her expression, something Maya couldn't quite place. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Lila Martinez," the bailiff announced. Maya's heart stopped. Lila Martinez. Could it be? After all these years? Judge Martinez took her seat and began reviewing the case files. Maya studied her face, looking for traces of the girl she had once known. The girl who had been her best friend until everything fell apart. The girl who had shared secrets and dreams and promises that they would be friends forever. It had been over 20 years since Maya had seen Lila. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, played in the same parks, gone to the same schools. They had been inseparable until high school, when life took them in different directions, when misunderstandings and hurt feelings created a distance that seemed impossible to bridge. Have you ever run into someone from your past at the worst possible moment in your life? When you're vulnerable and scared and hoping no one you know will witness your struggles? That's exactly how Maya felt as she sat in that courtroom. Here she was, fighting to keep a roof over her son's head, and the judge deciding her fate was the girl who had once braided her hair during sleepovers, the girl who had promised to be her maid of honor someday, the girl who had stopped speaking to her after a terrible misunderstanding that Maya had regretted for decades. Judge Martinez didn't give any sign of recognizing Maya. She maintained perfect professional composure as she reviewed the eviction paperwork. Her expression was neutral, focused. Maya wondered if Lila even remembered her after all these years, or if she was pretending not to know her to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Mr. Griggs's attorney spoke first. She presented the case as a simple matter of business. A tenant who hadn't paid rent, a landlord who had been more than patient, a clear-cut situation that required immediate action. She painted Maya as irresponsible, someone who made excuses instead of meeting her obligations. Maya listened to this character assassination with growing anger. The lawyer didn't know anything about her life, about the sacrifices she made every day, about working until her hands were raw and her feet were bleeding, about skipping meals so her son could eat, about lying awake at night, worrying about the future. When it was David's turn to speak, he painted a different picture. A hard-working single mother facing impossible economic circumstances. A tenant who had tried repeatedly to work with her landlord. A woman whose only crime was being poor in a system designed to punish poverty. David presented evidence of Maya's employment, her efforts to communicate with Mr. Griggs, the community support that proved she was a valued neighbor. He argued that eviction would cause irreparable harm to Maya and her young son, that there had to be a better solution than throwing a family onto the street. Judge Martinez listened to both sides without revealing her thoughts. She asked pointed questions about the lease terms, about Mr. Griggs's efforts to work with his tenant, about Maya's ability to pay future rent if given more time. Her questions were fair but thorough, professional but not cold. Then she asked Maya to speak for herself, to explain her situation in her own words. Maya stood on shaking legs. This was her moment, her chance to save everything that mattered to her. "Your Honor?" Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I owe money. I'm not here to make excuses or ask for charity. I'm here because my 7-year-old son deserves to have a home." She talked about working 2 jobs, about the economic factors beyond her control that had reduced her income, about her love for the community and her determination to meet her obligations if given a fair chance, about Leo's need for stability and security. As Maya spoke, she noticed something change in Judge Martinez's expression, a slight softening around the eyes. a barely perceptible nod when Maya mentioned her son's name. Was it possible that Lila remembered? That some part of their old friendship still existed after all these years? When Maya finished speaking, the courtroom was silent. Mr. Griggs looked annoyed that his tenant had been allowed to give what he probably considered a sob story. His lawyer was already preparing her rebuttal. But Judge Martinez held up her hand for quiet. "I'm going to take a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence," she announced. "We'll reconvene at 10:30. As the courtroom emptied, Maya sat alone with David. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Everything she loved was hanging in the balance. One woman's decision would determine whether Leo had a home to come back to after school. During the recess, Maya stepped outside for fresh air. The November morning was crisp and clear. She could see the mountains in the distance, snow-capped peaks that looked peaceful and eternal. She tried to draw strength from their stability, to believe that somehow everything would work out. When court resumed, Judge Martinez looked directly at Maya before speaking. Her voice was calm but firm, professional but not unkind. "After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, I find that while the defendant does owe back rent, the circumstances warrant a structured solution rather than immediate eviction." Maya felt her knees go weak with relief. She wasn't being thrown out. Not today. Judge Martinez continued. "The defendant will be given 60 days to bring her account current. She will pay $400 now as a good faith gesture, with the remaining balance paid in monthly installments of $200 in addition to regular rent. The plaintiff will accept this arrangement and may not pursue eviction as long as the defendant meets these terms." Mr. Griggs's face turned red with anger. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear. But the judge's decision was final. Maya had won, not completely, but enough to save her home and her son's security. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Judge Martinez caught Maya's eye. For just a moment, the professional mask slipped. Maya saw recognition there, and something that might have been regret, or sadness, or both. Outside the courthouse, David shook Maya's hand and congratulated her on the victory. The community supporters who had come to witness the proceedings cheered and hugged her. Someone mentioned celebrating at the diner. But Maya needed a moment alone to process what had just happened. She had kept her home. That was the most important thing. Leo would still sleep in his own bed tonight. He could still walk to the same school tomorrow. He could still play in the same park with the same friends. His world remained stable even as his mother's world had nearly collapsed. But there was something else. Something that went beyond the legal victory. Lila Martinez had been her childhood best friend. And for just a moment in that courtroom, Maya had seen the girl she used to know. The girl who had shared her deepest secrets. The girl who had understood her better than anyone else in the world. Over the following days, Maya threw herself into meeting the court's requirements. She picked up extra shifts at the diner. She accepted additional cleaning contracts. She worked 18-hour days and fell into bed exhausted. But she was determined to prove that the judge's faith in her hadn't been misplaced. The $400 good faith payment had come from the community fundraiser and her own meager savings. It left her with almost no money for groceries or utilities. But Maya had learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. She made soup from soup bones. She darned Leo's socks instead of buying new ones. She found ways to survive that her grandmother would have recognized and admired. Leo noticed that his mother was working even more than usual. He didn't complain, but Maya could see the worry in his young eyes. 7-year-old children shouldn't have to worry about whether their family will survive. But Leo was observant and sensitive. He picked up on his mother's stress even when she tried to hide it. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" he asked one evening, as Maya helped him with his homework. Maya pulled her son into her arms and held him tight. "Yes, baby. We're going to be fine. Mommy's working hard to make sure of it." I could get a job, Leo said seriously. I could deliver newspapers or walk dogs. Maya's heart broke a little at her son's innocence, at his willingness to help shoulder a burden that should never be his to carry. That's very sweet of you, honey. But your job is to be a kid, to go to school and play with your friends and let Mommy worry about the grown-up stuff. But privately, Maya wondered how long she could keep this up. Working 18-hour days was taking its toll. She was losing weight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands were cracked and bleeding from constant exposure to cleaning chemicals. She was running on adrenaline and determination, but even those had limits. 2 weeks after the court hearing, Maya was cleaning offices downtown when she ran into someone unexpected. She was mopping the floor in the lobby of a law firm when she heard her name called softly. Maya Rodriguez. She looked up to see Judge Martinez standing near the elevator. Out of her robes, Lila looked smaller, more vulnerable, more like the girl Maya had once known. She was wearing a simple gray suit and carrying a briefcase. Her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its courtroom bun. Judge Martinez, Maya said, suddenly conscious of her uniform and the mop in her hands. I didn't expect to see you here. I had a meeting with some attorneys, Lila explained. And please call me Lila, at least when we're not in court. An awkward silence stretched between them. 20 years of separation. 20 years of hurt feelings and misunderstandings. 20 years of wondering what might have been if they had handled things differently. I should get back to work, Maya said finally. I don't want to cause any problems for you. I know it might look inappropriate for us to be talking. Wait, Lila said quickly. Could we talk sometime? Away from the courthouse? I know it's complicated, but I've thought about you over the years, about what happened between us, about how things ended. Maya felt tears threatening to spill over. She had thought about Lila, too, more than she cared to admit. Even during the darkest moments of her separation and financial struggles, she had sometimes wondered what advice her old best friend might have given, what comfort she might have provided. I'd like that, Maya said softly. But I don't know when. I'm working all the time now, trying to keep up with the payment plan. I understand, Lila said. But if you can find an hour sometime, I'd really appreciate the chance to talk, to explain some things, to apologize for others. They exchanged phone numbers like teenagers afraid of being caught by their parents. Maya promised to call when she could find time in her impossible schedule. Lila promised to be patient and understanding about the constraints Maya was facing. As the elevator doors closed on Lila's gentle smile, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just about keeping her home or meeting her financial obligations. Hope about reclaiming something precious that she had thought was lost forever. Meanwhile, Mr. Griggs was not taking his courtroom defeat gracefully. He had been forced to accept Judge Martinez's payment plan, but he was determined to make Maya's life as difficult as possible within the legal boundaries. He began conducting surprise inspections of her apartment. He complained about noise levels when Leo played with toys. He sent certified letters about minor lease violations that had never been enforced before. His lawyer had advised him to be careful, to follow the court's order precisely and avoid any appearance of harassment. But Mr. Griggs was a man accustomed to getting his way. Being told no by a judge, especially a female judge who seemed sympathetic to his tenant's sob story, rankled him more than he cared to admit. Sarah Griggs watched her father's behavior with growing concern and embarrassment. She had tried to talk to him about Maya's situation, about showing compassion for a struggling single mother, about considering the human cost of his business decisions. But Mason Griggs dismissed his daughter's concerns as naive idealism. Business is business, Sarah, he told her repeatedly. If I start making exceptions for every tenant with a hard luck story, I'll be bankrupt within a year. Maya Rodriguez needs to learn that the real world doesn't care about your problems. It only cares about results. But Sarah had seen Maya at community events, had watched her interact with her son and neighbors, had witnessed the genuine warmth and kindness that her father refused to acknowledge. Sarah knew that Maya wasn't lazy or irresponsible. She was just poor, and in her father's world, being poor was treated like a moral failing rather than an economic circumstance. The tension between Sarah and her father reached a breaking point when he announced his intention to start eviction proceedings against another tenant, an elderly man whose Social Security check was late due to government bureaucracy. Sarah realized that her father's cruelty toward Maya wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior that treated tenants as disposable obstacles to profit maximization. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you know is right? Between keeping peace at home and standing up for vulnerable people who need an advocate? Sarah faced that choice and made it decisively. She began volunteering with the local tenant rights organization. She used her knowledge of her father's business practices to help other tenants understand their rights. She became an inside source of information about landlord tactics that violated those rights. When Mr. Griggs discovered what his daughter was doing, their relationship exploded into open warfare. He accused her of betraying the family business, of biting the hand that fed her, of being ungrateful for the privileged life his success had provided. Sarah accused him of being a heartless bully who measured his worth by how much suffering he could inflict on vulnerable people. "You're just like your mother," Mr. Griggs said during their worst argument. "Full of bleeding heart nonsense that ignores reality. The world isn't a fairy tale, Sarah. It's a competition, and I didn't raise you to be a loser." The comparison to her deceased mother hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her mother had indeed been compassionate. She had volunteered at homeless shelters and donated to children's charities. She had tried to soften her husband's harder edges and teach her daughter that success meant nothing if it came at the expense of basic human decency. "Maybe Mom was right," Sarah shot back. "Maybe there's more to life than making money off other people's desperation. Maybe being decent is more important than being rich." After that fight, Sarah moved out of her father's house. She got a job with a nonprofit organization and found a small apartment across town. The work didn't pay much, but it allowed her to sleep at night knowing that she was working toward justice rather than perpetuating injustice. Meanwhile, Maya was struggling to keep up with her court-ordered payments while maintaining some semblance of normal life for Leo. She had managed the first monthly installment, but barely. Every dollar was accounted for before she earned it. There was no room for emergencies or unexpected expenses. Then, Leo got sick. Not seriously ill, but sick enough to need medicine and time off school. Sick enough that Maya had to miss work to take care of him. Sick enough to throw her carefully balanced budget into chaos. The missed shifts at the diner cost her nearly $200 in wages, money she desperately needed for the next payment to Mr. Griggs. Maya sat at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by bills and calculations. No matter how she worked the numbers, she was coming up short. She had exhausted every possibility, borrowed from Peter to pay Paul until both Peter and Paul had nothing left to lend. She thought about calling David Thompson for legal advice, but she knew what he would tell her, that missing a court-ordered payment could result in immediate eviction. That judges took these arrangements seriously and expected tenants to honor them completely, that her previous victory wouldn't protect her if she failed to meet the terms. Maya also thought about calling Lila, about reaching out to her old friend for help or advice or just a sympathetic ear. But how could she ask the judge who had shown her mercy to compromise her professional ethics? How could she put Lila in an impossible position between personal loyalty and judicial responsibility? Instead, Maya made a decision that went against every independent bone in her body. She swallowed her pride and asked her neighbors for help. Not for money, because she knew they had already given what they could, but for work, for opportunities, for any possible way to earn the money she needed. Mrs. Chen offered to pay Maya to deep clean her apartment. Tom asked her to organize his auto shop's paperwork. The bakery owner hired her to cater a small, private party. Maya took every opportunity, working around the clock to scrape together enough money to avoid defaulting on her agreement. She made the payment with 12 hours to spare, but the stress and exhaustion were taking their toll. Maya was losing weight she couldn't afford to lose. Her immune system was compromised from lack of sleep and proper nutrition. She was running on empty, sustained only by her determination to provide stability for Leo. One evening, as Maya walked home from her cleaning job, she finally called Leela. She had tried to handle everything alone, but the isolation was becoming unbearable. She needed to talk to someone who understood her history, someone who might remember the girl she used to be before life wore her down to the bone. "Lila? It's Maya. I know it's late, but I wondered if you might have time to talk." "Of course," Lila said immediately. "I've been hoping you'd call. Are you okay? You sound exhausted." "I am exhausted," Maya admitted. "I'm barely hanging on, Lila. I'm meeting the court requirements, but just barely. And I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop on the neutral ground between their neighborhoods. Somewhere they could talk privately without worrying about being seen by people who knew their professional relationship. Somewhere Maya could let her guard down without feeling judged. The coffee shop was warm and quiet on a Tuesday evening. Maya arrived first and chose a corner table where they could speak without being overheard. She ordered tea because coffee was too expensive, and she was counting every penny. When Lila walked in, Maya felt her heart catch. Her old friend looked exactly as she had in the courthouse, but somehow different, softer, more vulnerable. "Thank you for coming," Maya said as Lila sat down across from her. "Thank you for calling," Lila replied. "I wasn't sure you would. I know how complicated this is." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. 20 years of separation stretched between them like a canyon neither knew how to cross. Finally, Lila spoke. "I want you to know that I didn't request your case. The assignment was random. When I saw your name on the docket, I almost recused myself, but I thought that might hurt your chances with another judge, and I hoped I could be fair while still being helpful." "You saved my home," Maya said simply. "You gave me a chance when I didn't think I had one left." "I gave you what the law required," Lila corrected gently. "Nothing more, nothing less. But I'm glad it helped." They talked carefully at first. Professional small talk. Updates on their lives that stayed safely in the present tense. Maya learned that Lila had been married and divorced, that she had no children but had always wanted them, that she had worked her way through law school while supporting herself with part-time jobs, that becoming a judge had been a dream she had pursued relentlessly. Lila learned that Maya had struggled as a single mother for years, that she had sacrificed her own dreams to provide for Leo, that she worked harder than anyone Lila knew but still barely scraped by, that she was proud and independent to a fault, but loved her son more than her own life. Gradually, the conversation turned to their shared past, to the friendship that had meant everything to both of them, to the misunderstanding that had torn them apart during their senior year of high school. It had started with a boy, as these things often do. Jake Morrison had been the kind of teenager that every girl noticed. Handsome, athletic, charming. He had asked Maya to prom, and she had been over the moon with excitement. She had spent weeks planning her dress and dreaming about the perfect evening. But then, Jake had approached Lila a few days before prom. He had told her that Maya was just using him to make someone else jealous, that she had been laughing about him behind his back, that he would rather take Lila, who was more genuine and trustworthy. Lila had been hurt and confused. She had confronted Maya, who had no idea what Jake was talking about. Maya had insisted that she genuinely liked Jake and was excited about prom, but Lila had already agreed to go with him, believing his lies about Maya's motives. "I was 17 and stupid," Lila said now, tears threatening to spill over. "I should have known Jake was manipulating both of us. I should have trusted you instead of some boy I barely knew. But I was jealous, Maya. You were always prettier, more popular. Boys always noticed you first. When Jake said he preferred me, I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored my better judgment." Maya reached across the table and touched Lila's hand. "We were both 17 and stupid. I was so hurt that you would believe him over me, that you would choose a boy over our friendship. I said some terrible things to you, things I've regretted for 20 years. I've missed you," Lila whispered. "I've missed having a friend who knew me before I became successful, who remembered when I was just an awkward kid with big dreams and bigger insecurities." "I've missed you too," Maya admitted, "especially during the hard times. I used to imagine what advice you would give me, what you would say to make me feel better." They talked until the coffee shop closed, about their childhood adventures, about their teenage dreams, about the different paths their lives had taken, about the ways they had both changed and the ways they had stayed the same at their core. When they finally said goodbye, something had shifted between them. The 20-year wall of hurt and misunderstanding hadn't completely crumbled, but there were cracks in it now, spaces where light could get through, possibilities for rebuilding what had once been beautiful. Maya went home feeling lighter than she had in months. Not because her problems were solved, but because she no longer felt completely alone in facing them. She had her old friend back, even if their relationship had to navigate new complications and boundaries. But Mr. Griggs was watching Maya more carefully than ever. He had hired a private investigator to document any violations of her lease or failure to meet court requirements. He was determined to build a case for eviction the moment she slipped up. The investigator reported that Maya was working constantly, but seemed to be meeting her financial obligations. She was current on rent and making the required additional payments. Her apartment was clean and quiet. Her son was well-behaved and supervised. The lack of ammunition frustrated Mr. Griggs. He wanted Maya gone, not because she was a bad tenant, but because she had embarrassed him, because she had rallied community support against him, because she represented everything he disliked about tenants who couldn't pay their bills but refused to disappear quietly. His obsession with Maya was beginning to affect his other properties and relationships. His business partners expressed concern about his fixation on one problematic tenant. His remaining tenants began organizing themselves, inspired by Maya's successful resistance to his heavy-handed tactics. Sarah watched her father's descent into bitter vindictiveness with sadness and anger. She had tried to maintain some relationship with him despite their philosophical differences, but his behavior toward Maya and other struggling tenants made any reconciliation impossible. Winter arrived early that year. November brought snow and freezing temperatures that strained Maya's already tight budget. Heating costs skyrocketed. Leo needed winter clothes he had outgrown from the previous year. Maya's car began showing signs of mechanical problems that she couldn't afford to repair properly. Every day became a careful calculation of survival. How to keep the apartment warm enough for Leo without running up an impossible utility bill. How to provide nutritious meals when fresh vegetables were expensive and processed food was cheap. How to maintain her work schedule when her unreliable car might break down at any moment. Maya developed a persistent cough from working in cold buildings without adequate protective clothing. She ignored it because she couldn't afford to miss work for a doctor's visit. She ignored it because acknowledging illness would mean acknowledging weakness. She ignored it because she had no choice but to keep going. Leo began bringing home stories from school about other children's Christmas plans, expensive toys they were hoping for, family vacations to warm places, activities that required money Maya simply didn't have. She listened with a smile and made vague promises about making Christmas special somehow. But late at night, when Leo was asleep, Maya cried into her pillow, not just from exhaustion or stress or physical pain. She cried from the fear that she was failing her son, that her love and determination weren't enough to give him the childhood he deserved, that her best efforts would never be sufficient in a world that measured worth by bank account balance. One particularly difficult evening in December, Maya's phone rang. She almost didn't answer because she was afraid it was another creditor or bill collector, but the caller ID showed Lila's name. "Hi," Maya said, trying to keep the exhaustion out of her voice. "Hi," Lila replied. "I hope it's okay that I called. I know you're incredibly busy, but I wanted to check on you. You seemed really stressed when we had coffee." Maya felt tears threatening again. Simple kindness had become so rare in her life that even a concerned phone call felt overwhelming. "I'm okay. Just tired. It's harder in winter, you know. Everything costs more when it's cold." "Are you eating enough?" Lila asked gently. "You looked like you'd lost weight." The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She had been losing weight because she often skipped meals to save money for Leo's food. But admitting that felt like admitting failure as a mother and provider. "I'm fine," Maya lied. "Just busy. Always busy." Lila heard the lie in her old friend's voice but didn't push. Instead, she shared some news that she hoped might help. "I wanted you to know that the community center is organizing a Christmas drive for families. Nothing charity-like, just neighbors helping neighbors with gifts and food. Patricia asked me to mention it to you." Maya's pride immediately rebelled against the suggestion. She didn't want to be the object of pity or charity. She didn't want Leo to know that other people had to supplement their Christmas because his mother couldn't provide adequately. But another part of her, the practical part that had learned to swallow pride when necessary, recognized the offer for what it was: community support. The same network of caring neighbors who had rallied around her during the eviction crisis. People who understood that anyone could face hard times and that helping others was simply the right thing to do. "I'll think about it," Maya said finally. "No pressure," Lila assured her. "But if you decide you're interested, Patricia has all the details. And Maya? There's no shame in accepting help when you need it. We all need help sometimes, even judges and lawyers and people who look like they have it all figured out." After hanging up, Maya sat in her dark apartment and thought about Lila's words, about pride and shame and the difference between charity and community support, about what was best for Leo versus what made her feel better about herself, about swallowing her pride one more time if it meant giving her son a happier Christmas. The next day, Maya called Patricia at the community center. She explained her situation carefully, emphasizing that she was working and meeting her obligations, but that Christmas extras were simply beyond her budget. Patricia was warm and understanding, making it clear that many families were in similar situations and that the holiday drive was about celebration, not charity. "We're asking each family to contribute something if they can," Patricia explained. "It doesn't have to be money. Maybe you could help coordinate food distribution or help wrap gifts. Everyone contributes what they're able to contribute. That's what makes it a true community effort." Maya agreed to help with gift wrapping and food packaging. It felt better to be part of the solution rather than just a recipient of help. When she told Leo about the community Christmas celebration, his eyes lit up with excitement. He began talking about what he might contribute to help other families. His generosity and enthusiasm reminded Maya that she had raised a kind, caring child despite their financial struggles. The Christmas drive was held on the weekend before the holiday. The community center was transformed into a winter wonderland with decorations made by local children and volunteers. Families brought potluck dishes to share. Local musicians provided entertainment. Children played games while parents sorted gifts and food packages. Maya worked alongside other volunteers, many of whom were facing their own financial challenges. She realized that she wasn't alone in struggling to make ends meet. that many hard-working families were dealing with similar pressures, that accepting help didn't make her a failure but rather part of a community that took care of its members. Leo received several thoughtful gifts from the drive, but he was more excited about the coloring books and small toys he had selected to give to younger children. Maya watched her son's joy in giving to others and felt proud of the values she had instilled in him despite their difficult circumstances. Even more meaningful was the sense of belonging Maya felt that day. For months, she had been isolated by work and stress and the constant fight to survive. She had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than her immediate struggles. The Christmas drive reminded her that community support wasn't about pity or charity. It was about recognizing that everyone had something to offer and everyone deserved to be valued. As winter progressed into the new year, Maya began to find a sustainable rhythm. She was still working constantly and watching every penny, but she was meeting her court-mandated payments consistently. Her relationship with Lila was slowly rebuilding through careful phone calls and occasional coffee meetings that navigated the ethical boundaries of their professional situation. Leo was thriving in school despite the chaos in their financial life. His teachers praised his kindness toward other children and his resilience in facing challenges. Maya realized that her efforts to shield him from their worst problems had been successful. He was growing into a compassionate, confident child who understood the value of hard work and community support. Mr. Griggs, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly frustrated with his inability to find grounds for evicting Maya. His private investigators' reports consistently showed that she was meeting all requirements and maintaining her apartment properly. His other tenants were more organized and assertive about their rights, partially inspired by Maya's successful resistance to his tactics. The stress of constant conflict was taking its toll on Mr. Griggs's health and business relationships. His blood pressure was elevated. His golf partners were tired of hearing about his problem tenant. His business associates questioned his judgment in pursuing what seemed like a personal vendetta rather than focusing on profitable operations. Sarah continued to work with the tenant rights organization, but she had maintained some contact with her father through carefully neutral Christmas and birthday cards. She hoped that time and perspective might soften his attitudes, but his obsession with Maya suggested that he was moving in the opposite direction. In February, Maya received unexpected news that would change the trajectory of her life. The diner where she had worked for 3 years was being sold to new owners who planned to renovate and rebrand it as an upscale bistro. Maya's position would be eliminated along with most of the current staff. The news hit Maya like a physical blow. The diner job provided most of her income and had been the stable foundation that allowed her to keep up with her court-mandated payments. Without it, she would be back in crisis mode within weeks. Maya met with David Thompson to discuss her options. He explained that losing a job wasn't grounds for modifying the court agreement unless she could prove that the job loss was due to factors completely beyond her control. Even then, she would need to demonstrate that she was actively seeking replacement employment and doing everything possible to meet her obligations. "The good news is that you have several months of successful payments," David explained. "That shows good faith and responsibility. If you do need to ask the court for modified terms, you'll be asking from a position of strength rather than as someone who has been consistently problematic." But Maya didn't want to go back to court. She didn't want to face Mr. Griggs again or put Lila in the difficult position of making decisions about payment modifications. She wanted to solve this problem herself, the same way she had solved every other challenge in her life. Maya threw herself into job searching with the same determination she had applied to everything else. She filled out applications at restaurants, retail stores, and cleaning services throughout the city. She updated her resume to highlight her customer service skills and work ethic. She practiced interview answers that emphasized her reliability and experience, but finding employment that paid enough to cover her expenses proved more difficult than Maya had anticipated. Many service jobs offered only part-time hours or minimum wage with no benefits. The competition was fierce, with dozens of applicants for every position. Employers seemed skeptical of Maya's ability to balance multiple jobs with single motherhood responsibilities. After 2 weeks of unsuccessful job hunting, Maya began to panic. She had enough savings to cover 1 more month of payments, but after that, she would default on her agreement with Mr. Griggs. Everything she had fought for would be lost. Leo would lose his home and his stability because his mother couldn't find adequate employment in an economy that seemed designed to crush people like her. Do you remember a time when you felt like the whole world was against you? When every door seemed to slam shut just as you reached for the handle? That's where Maya found herself in late February, desperate and running out of options. She had applied for dozens of jobs and received only polite rejection letters. Her savings were nearly exhausted. Her car was making ominous noises that suggested expensive repairs would be needed soon. She was facing the very real possibility of becoming homeless with a 7-year-old child depending on her. In desperation, Maya called Lila, not to ask for help with the court case, but simply to talk to someone who cared about her, to share her fears with the person who knew her best, even after 20 years of separation. "I don't know what to do," Maya admitted when Lila answered the phone. "I've applied everywhere. I've swallowed my pride and begged for jobs I'm overqualified for. Nobody wants to hire someone who might need flexibility for childcare or who has been working multiple jobs to survive. They see desperation and assume I'm unstable." Lila listened quietly as Maya poured out her frustrations and fears. When Maya finished, Lila was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke carefully. "I can't give you legal advice about your case, but I can tell you that there are resources available for people in your situation. Job placement services, training programs, community organizations that help single parents transition between jobs. Have you looked into those options?" "I don't have time for training programs," Maya said bitterly. "I need employment now. I need a paycheck next week or I can't make my payment to Mr. Griggs. What about asking for a temporary modification? Just until you're employed again?" "I won't go back to court," Maya said firmly. "I won't give that man the satisfaction of seeing me fail. I'll find another way." But privately, Maya was beginning to wonder if there was another way, if she had finally hit the limits of what determination and hard work could accomplish. If the system was truly rigged against people like her, no matter how desperately they tried to succeed. That night, after Leo was asleep, Maya sat at her kitchen table and stared at her bank statement. The numbers were brutal and unforgiving. She had exactly $437 left. Her next payment to Mr. Griggs was $400, due in 10 days. That would leave her with $37 to cover groceries, utilities, gas, and everything else until she found employment. Maya had never felt so alone and helpless in her entire life. She had fought so hard for so long, but she was finally facing a problem that couldn't be solved through determination and sacrifice. She needed help, but her pride and independence made accepting help feel like failure. Then Leo called out from his bedroom. "Mom, can you come here?" Maya found her son sitting up in bed, looking worried and much older than his 7 years. "Are you okay, honey? Did you have a bad dream?" "No," Leo said seriously. "I heard you crying. Are we in trouble again?" Maya's heart broke at her son's perceptive question. She had tried so hard to shield him from their financial stress, but children always knew more than adults wanted to believe. Leo had lived through the eviction crisis and the constant worry that followed. He understood that his mother was fighting battles he couldn't fully comprehend. "Things are a little challenging right now," Maya admitted carefully. "But we're going to be okay. Mommy is working very hard to make sure of that." "I've been saving my allowance," Leo said, reaching under his pillow to pull out a small cloth bag. "I have $17.53. You can have it if it helps." Maya stared at her son's carefully saved allowance money and began to cry. not from sadness or desperation, but from overwhelming love for this incredible child who was willing to give everything he had to help his mother. In that moment, she realized that she had already succeeded at the most important job in her life. She had raised a son who was generous, caring, and willing to sacrifice for others. "Thank you, baby," Maya whispered, pulling Leo into her arms. "That's the most generous offer anyone has ever made to me. But that's your money. You've been saving it for something special, and I want you to keep saving it. Mommy will find a way to take care of everything else." The next morning, Maya made a decision that went against every instinct she had developed over years of fierce independence. She called Patricia at the community center and asked about job placement services. She swallowed her pride and admitted that she needed help beyond what she could provide for herself. Patricia was immediately supportive and practical. She explained that the community center worked with several local businesses that were committed to hiring from within the community. Many of these employers understood the challenges facing single parents and were willing to offer flexible scheduling and comprehensive benefits. "There's a new nonprofit organization that just opened downtown," Patricia explained. "They're looking for someone with customer service experience to work as a client coordinator. The pay is better than most service jobs, and they offer health insurance after 90 days. The woman who runs it specifically wants to hire someone from our community who understands the challenges our families face." Maya felt a flutter of hope for the first time in weeks. A job with benefits, a position that valued her experience and understanding rather than seeing her situation as a liability, an opportunity to help other people while supporting her own family. The interview was scheduled for the following Monday. Maya spent the weekend preparing carefully, borrowing a professional outfit from a neighbor, and researching the organization's mission and services. The nonprofit provided assistance to families facing housing insecurity, employment challenges, and other crises. It was work that Maya could feel passionate about because she understood the problems from personal experience. The woman who interviewed Maya was named Dr. Janet Williams. She was an African-American woman in her 50s who had started the organization after her own experiences with poverty and discrimination earlier in her life. Dr. Williams listened to Maya's story with understanding and empathy rather than judgment. "I'm looking for someone who can connect with our clients," Dr. Williams explained. "Someone who understands what it's like to work multiple jobs and still struggle to pay bills. Someone who knows how it feels to worry about whether you can provide everything your child needs. I think you might be exactly what we need." Maya left the interview feeling more optimistic than she had in months. This wasn't just a job opportunity. It was a chance to find meaning in her struggles by helping others face similar challenges. It was an opportunity to transform her pain into purpose. Dr. Williams called that evening to offer Maya the position. The salary was nearly double what she had been earning at the diner. The health insurance would eliminate one of Maya's major financial stresses. The work schedule was Monday through Friday, which would allow her to spend more time with Leo. Maya accepted immediately, then called Lila to share the good news. "I got the job," she said, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. "A real job with benefits and regular hours and work that actually matters." "That's wonderful," Lila said warmly. "I'm so happy for you, and proud of you for not giving up when things looked impossible." "I almost did give up," Maya admitted. "I was so close to believing that the system was rigged against people like me. But maybe the system isn't perfect, but there are still good people trying to make it work better." Maya started her new job the following Monday. The nonprofit's offices were in a renovated building downtown, with large windows that let in natural light and walls decorated with inspirational artwork created by local artists. The atmosphere was professional but warm, focused on serving clients with dignity and respect. Maya's responsibilities included conducting intake interviews with new clients, helping them navigate available resources, and following up to ensure they received appropriate assistance. It was complex work that required empathy, organization, and problem-solving skills. Maya discovered that her years of managing her own crises had prepared her perfectly for helping others manage theirs. Her first day on the job, Maya met a young mother who was facing eviction from her apartment. The woman's story was heartbreakingly familiar. A relationship that ended badly, child support that never arrived, employment that didn't pay enough to cover basic expenses. The slow slide from barely making it to facing homelessness. Maya listened to the woman's story with complete understanding and worked with her to develop a plan for avoiding eviction. They identified emergency rental assistance programs, job training opportunities, and child care resources that could provide stability while the woman rebuilt her life. By the end of the appointment, both women were crying, but they were tears of hope rather than despair. "Thank you," the client said as she prepared to leave. "I was so scared when I came in here. I thought you would judge me or think I was stupid for getting into this situation, but you understand, you really understand." Maya realized that her own struggles had given her something invaluable: the ability to help others without judgment or condescension. She knew firsthand that poverty wasn't a character flaw or a sign of laziness. It was an economic condition that could affect anyone, regardless of how hard they worked or how much they cared about their families. With her new job providing financial stability, Maya was able to make her payments to Mr. Griggs without constantly worrying about where the money would come from. She was even able to start a small emergency fund for the first time in years. Leo noticed the change in his mother's stress level and began sleeping better at night. But Mr. Griggs was not pleased with Maya's improved circumstances. His private investigator reported that Maya had found better employment and seemed to be thriving financially. This news contradicted his narrative that Maya was irresponsible and destined to fail. It suggested that her previous struggles had been due to external circumstances rather than personal inadequacies. Instead of being pleased that his tenant was now financially stable, Mr. Griggs became more resentful. Maya's success made his treatment of her seem cruel and unnecessary. It highlighted the fact that she had needed support and opportunity rather than punishment and harassment. Mr. Griggs began looking for other ways to make Maya's life difficult within the bounds of their legal agreement. He increased his surprise apartment inspections. He nitpicked minor issues that violated technical lease requirements but had never been enforced before. He sent threatening letters about noise complaints that seemed to be fabricated. Maya documented each incident but tried not to let Mr. Griggs's harassment affect her growing happiness and stability. She was building a new life based on meaningful work and financial security. She wasn't going to let one bitter man's resentment destroy what she had worked so hard to achieve. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal and possibility. Maya had been at her new job for 2 months and was receiving excellent performance evaluations. Her clients appreciated her empathy and expertise. Her colleagues respected her dedication and insight. She was finally using her intelligence and interpersonal skills in ways that felt fulfilling. Leo was also thriving. His grades had improved as his mother's stress decreased. He was participating in more school activities and making new friends. He still helped around the house and understood that money required careful management, but he no longer worried constantly about their survival. One evening in April, Maya received an unexpected phone call. Dr. Williams asked her to stay after work for a private conversation. Maya's first instinct was to worry that she had done something wrong, but Dr. Williams quickly reassured her. "I want to talk to you about a promotion opportunity," Dr. Williams said. "We're expanding our services to include financial counseling and housing advocacy. I think you would be perfect to head up that program. It would mean a significant salary increase and the opportunity to design services based on your own experiences and expertise." Maya was stunned. A promotion after only 2 months. The chance to create programs that could help families avoid the crises she had faced. It seemed too good to be true. "But doctor, Williams was serious and enthusiastic about Maya's potential. "I know it's a lot to consider," Dr. Williams continued. "The position would require some additional training, but we'd provide that and pay you during the training period. You'd be developing something completely new, which means a lot of responsibility but also a lot of creative freedom." Maya accepted the promotion immediately. The salary increase would allow her to start saving money for Leo's future education. The work would let her transform her painful experiences into tools for helping other families avoid similar struggles. It was an opportunity that perfectly matched her skills, experience, and passion. That night, Maya called Lila to share her incredible news. Their friendship had continued to deepen over the months, carefully navigating the ethical boundaries created by Lila's role as the judge in Maya's case. They spoke regularly, but avoided any discussion of legal matters. "I'm so proud of you," Lila said when Maya finished describing her promotion. "You've not only survived everything you've been through, you've found a way to use those experiences to help others. That takes incredible strength and wisdom." "I couldn't have done it without the community support I received," Maya said, "including yours. Even when we couldn't talk about the legal case directly, just knowing I had your friendship helped me keep going during the worst moments." "I'm glad," Lila said softly. "I always regretted how our friendship ended when we were teenagers. I'm grateful we've had the chance to rebuild it as adults." As spring turned into summer, Maya settled into her new responsibilities with enthusiasm and competence. She was designing financial literacy workshops for single parents. She was developing partnerships with local landlords who were willing to work with tenants facing temporary difficulties. She was creating resource guides that helped families navigate the complex web of social services and community assistance programs. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways that Maya had never experienced before. She was using her intelligence and creativity to solve systemic problems rather than just surviving them. She was being paid well for work that felt important and meaningful. She was building a career rather than just working jobs. Leo was proud of his mother's success and loved hearing about the families she was helping. He had inherited her compassion and often asked thoughtful questions about why some people had more advantages than others. Maya used these conversations to teach him about empathy, social justice, and the importance of using privilege and opportunities to help those who had less. Meanwhile, Mr. Griggs's obsession with Maya was beginning to seriously damage his business and personal relationships. His other tenants had organized into a formal association that monitored his practices and challenged lease violations. Several had moved out when their leases expired, citing his increasingly erratic behavior and punitive management style. Sarah had heard about her father's continued harassment of Maya through the tenant rights network. She was embarrassed and angry that he couldn't let go of his resentment even after Maya had proven herself to be a model tenant. Sarah decided it was time to confront her father directly about his self-destructive behavior. She arranged to meet him for lunch at a neutral restaurant, hoping that a public setting would encourage more civilized conversation. Mr. Griggs arrived looking haggard and stressed. The constant conflict and negative attention were clearly taking their toll on his health and peace of mind. "Dad, we need to talk about Maya Rodriguez," Sarah said without preamble. "Your behavior toward her has gone beyond business into something that looks like personal vindictiveness. It's hurting your reputation and your other business relationships." Mr. Griggs's face flushed with anger. "That woman made me look like a villain in front of the entire community. She turned my own daughter against me with her sob story. She embarrassed me in front of Judge Martinez and made me accept terms that set a terrible precedent for my other properties." Maya Rodriguez is a hard-working single mother who got behind on rent during a difficult economic period, Sarah replied firmly. "She's now current on all payments and has been an exemplary tenant for months. Your continued harassment is making you look petty and cruel, not strong or businesslike." "You don't understand business," Mr. Griggs snapped. "If I let one tenant get away with being late on payments, every tenant will expect the same treatment." I have to maintain standards and discipline. There's a difference between maintaining standards and nursing a grudge, Sarah shot back. Maya has met every requirement of your agreement. She's proven herself to be responsible and reliable. But you can't let go of your resentment about being challenged in court. You're acting like a child who didn't get his way. The conversation escalated from there, with both father and daughter saying things they would later regret. But Sarah made her point clear. Mr. Griggs's behavior was damaging his relationships with family, tenants, and business associates. If he continued down this path, he would end up isolated and bitter, with a reputation that would make future business dealings difficult. After Sarah left, Mr. Griggs sat alone in the restaurant for a long time. He was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about his behavior and motivations. His obsession with Maya had indeed gone beyond reasonable business practices. He had allowed personal resentment to override his professional judgment. He had become the kind of landlord that he himself would have criticized a few years earlier. But admitting error had never been easy for Mason Griggs. He had built his identity around being tough, successful, and uncompromising. Acknowledging that he had been wrong about Maya would require him to question other assumptions about business, success, and the treatment of people with less economic power. Summer passed peacefully for Maya. She was excelling in her new role and gaining recognition as an innovative program developer. She had been invited to speak at conferences about effective approaches to family financial stability. Her work was being noticed by other nonprofit organizations and government agencies. Leo was having his best summer ever. Maya's improved financial situation allowed for small luxuries like swimming lessons and a week at day camp. More importantly, her reduced stress and regular work schedule meant she could spend more quality time with him. They took weekend trips to local parks and beaches. They read books together every evening. They cooked meals as a team and talked about their dreams for the future. In August, Maya achieved a milestone that had seemed impossible just a year earlier. She paid off her debt to Mr. Griggs ahead of schedule. Her final payment was delivered with a professional letter thanking him for his patience and noting her satisfaction with their business relationship. Maya kept copies of everything for her records and felt enormous relief at closing this chapter of her life. Mr. Griggs received the payment and letter with mixed emotions. Maya's success contradicted his assumptions about her character and reliability. Her professional tone and early payoff demonstrated exactly the kind of responsible tenant relationship he claimed to value. He had no grounds for complaint about her behavior or performance. But instead of feeling satisfied that his tenant had met all obligations, Mr. Griggs felt oddly deflated. His campaign against Maya had given him focus and purpose, even if that purpose was ultimately destructive. Without her to resent and harass, he was forced to confront the emptiness and isolation that his behavior had created in other areas of his life. Fall arrived with its usual beauty in the Pacific Northwest. The leaves turned brilliant colors, and the air carried the crisp promise of winter. Maya looked forward to the changing seasons with genuine excitement for the first time in years. She had stability, meaningful work, and hope for the future. One October evening, Maya and Lila met for coffee to celebrate the first anniversary of Maya's court victory. It had become a tradition between them, marking not just legal success, but the renewal of their friendship and Maya's transformation from crisis to stability. "I can't believe how much has changed in just 1 year," Maya said as they sat in their favorite corner of the coffee shop. "This time last year I was terrified that Leo and I would become homeless. Now I'm designing programs to help other families avoid that same fear." "You've accomplished something remarkable," Lila agreed. "You've not only overcome enormous challenges, you've found ways to transform those challenges into tools for helping others. That takes extraordinary strength and wisdom." They talked about Maya's work, Leo's progress in school, and their own friendship that had survived decades of separation and the complications of their professional relationship. Maya realized that some of her deepest happiness came from having Lila back in her life. Their childhood bond had been real and strong, and their adult friendship had grown even deeper through shared understanding of life's complexities. As they prepared to leave, Maya asked a question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if we hadn't let that stupid misunderstanding separate us when we were teenagers?" Lila considered the question seriously before answering. "I think we both needed to live through different experiences to become the people we are now. Maybe we needed to face challenges separately before we could appreciate what we mean to each other. Maybe everything happened exactly as it needed to happen." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I'm grateful for where we are now, for getting you back as a friend, for Leo having the stability he deserves, for work that feels meaningful. I wouldn't change the difficult parts even if I could, because they led me to this place." As winter approached, Maya began working on her biggest project yet, a comprehensive resource center for families facing housing instability. The center would provide not just emergency assistance, but long-term support for building financial stability and economic independence. It would serve as a model for other communities dealing with similar challenges. The project required Maya to work with city officials, community organizations, and business leaders to develop sustainable funding and support systems. She found herself in meetings with judges, lawyers, and elected officials who treated her as an expert and peer. The contrast with her terrified appearance in court just over a year earlier was striking and empowering. One December morning, Maya received an unexpected phone call. Mr. Griggs asked if he could meet with her to discuss a business proposition. Maya was surprised but agreed to meet in a public place, curious about what he might want to discuss. They met at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where Maya and Lila often had their conversations. Mr. Griggs arrived looking older and more humble than Maya remembered. The months of stress and isolation had clearly taken their toll on him. "I want to apologize," he said without preamble. "My behavior toward you was unprofessional and unkind. You were a tenant facing economic difficulties, and instead of showing understanding, I let my own frustrations and prejudices guide my actions. I'm sorry." Maya was stunned by the directness and apparent sincerity of his apology. She had expected him to remain bitter and resentful indefinitely. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I also have a proposition," Mr. Griggs continued. "I've been learning about your work with the nonprofit organization. Sarah has kept me informed about your successes and the programs you're developing. I own several properties that could be used for transitional housing for families in crisis. I'd like to partner with your organization to provide that housing at below-market rates." Maya was even more surprised by this offer. "That's very generous, but I have to ask, what's changed your mind about working with people facing financial difficulties?" Mr. Griggs was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I've had time to think about the kind of man I want to be, about the legacy I want to leave. Sarah was right when she said my behavior was making me look petty and cruel. But more than that, it was making me feel petty and cruel. I want to find a way to use my properties to help people rather than just extract maximum profit from their desperation." They spent the next hour discussing possibilities for collaboration. Maya was cautious, but open to exploring how Mr. Griggs's properties could support her organization's mission. She made it clear that any partnership would need to prioritize tenant welfare and dignity above profit maximization. "I understand, Mr. Griggs said. "I know I have a lot to prove after the way I treated you, but I'd like the chance to try. To show that people can change and that businesses can serve social good as well as financial gain." Maya agreed to present Mr. Griggs's proposal to Dr. Williams and the nonprofit's board of directors. If they approved exploring the partnership, Maya would work with him to develop housing programs that truly served families in crisis rather than exploiting their vulnerability. The meeting ended cordially, with both parties understanding that rebuilding trust would require time and consistent action. But Maya felt hopeful that Mr. Griggs's apparent change of heart was genuine and that their past conflict could be transformed into future collaboration. As Christmas approached, Maya reflected on the incredible journey of the past year and a half. She had gone from facing eviction to developing innovative programs that helped other families avoid similar crises. She had reconnected with her dearest childhood friend and built meaningful professional relationships. She had provided Leo with the stability and security he deserved while modeling resilience and compassion. The community Christmas drive that year held special meaning for Maya. Instead of being a recipient of assistance, she was one of the organizers, using her experience and expertise to ensure that families received help with dignity and respect. Leo was old enough to understand the significance of the reversal and took pride in his mother's transformation from someone who needed help to someone who provided it. On Christmas morning, Maya and Leo opened modest gifts and shared a breakfast that Maya had prepared without worrying about the cost of ingredients. The apartment was warm and comfortable, decorated with handmade ornaments and filled with the security that came from financial stability. "Mom," Leo said as they cleaned up after breakfast, "I'm proud of you for helping other families like us, for making their lives better when they're scared and sad." Maya hugged her son tightly, overwhelmed by his understanding and compassion. "I'm proud of you too, baby, for being kind and generous even when things were hard for us, for never complaining about our situation or asking for things I couldn't provide. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." As they settled in to read together, Maya thought about all the people who had played a role in her transformation. Patricia at the community center, who had connected her with resources and opportunities. David Thompson, who had represented her with skill and dedication. Dr. Williams, who had recognized her potential and given her meaningful work. Sarah Griggs, who had shown that compassion could bridge family conflicts and class differences. Most of all, Maya thought about Lila, her childhood friend who had become a fair and compassionate judge, the person who had shown her mercy in the courtroom and renewed friendship outside of it. The woman who had demonstrated that past wounds could heal and that adult relationships could be even deeper than childhood bonds. Have you ever lived through or known someone who went through something similar? Have you watched someone fight against impossible circumstances and refuse to give up? Have you seen communities come together to support families in crisis or individuals transform their pain into purpose? Maya's story represents thousands of similar stories happening in communities across the country. Single parents working multiple jobs but still struggling to pay rent. Families facing eviction despite their best efforts to meet their obligations. Children who worry about homelessness and hunger while their parents sacrifice everything to provide stability. But Maya's story also represents the possibility of transformation. The power of community support to lift up struggling families, the importance of fair and compassionate legal systems that recognize human complexity rather than just enforcing rules. The potential for personal growth and social change when people choose empathy over judgment. Maya's reunion with Lila demonstrates that relationships can survive decades of separation and misunderstanding. Their friendship was renewed not because they ignored their past conflicts, but because they faced them honestly and chose forgiveness over resentment. Their adult relationship became stronger because it was built on mutual respect and understanding rather than childhood nostalgia. Mr. Griggs's apparent transformation shows that even the most rigid and unsympathetic people can change when they're confronted with the consequences of their actions. His daughter Sarah's persistence and the community's response to his behavior forced him to examine his attitudes and consider different ways of relating to people with less economic power. The community support that Maya received illustrates the importance of networks that help families survive temporary crises. These networks don't just provide financial assistance, they offer emotional support, practical resources, and the dignity that comes from being valued by others. They remind struggling families that their difficulties are temporary circumstances, not permanent conditions or personal failures. Maya's professional success demonstrates that people who have faced significant challenges often develop skills and perspectives that make them uniquely qualified to help others facing similar difficulties. Her personal experience with poverty, housing insecurity, and single parenthood gave her credibility and insight that no amount of academic training could provide. Leo's development throughout the story shows how children can thrive even in difficult circumstances when they have parents who love them consistently and communities that support them tangibly. His generosity and compassion reflect the values Maya taught him through her actions rather than just her words. Dr. Williams's recognition of Maya's potential illustrates the importance of employers who see past economic circumstances to recognize individual capabilities and character. Her willingness to take a chance on Maya and provide opportunities for advancement created a path out of poverty that benefited not just Maya and Leo, but all the families Maya would eventually help through her work. The Pacific Northwest setting emphasizes how local culture and community values can influence individual stories and outcomes. The region's emphasis on environmental sustainability, social justice, and community cooperation provided a context where Maya's struggles were met with support rather than judgment, where neighbors took responsibility for each other's welfare. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or someone you care about, if it gave you hope that circumstances can change and communities can make a difference, then please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss future stories. Your support allows us to continue sharing narratives that honor the dignity and resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Maya's story continues today in her work with families throughout her city. She has become a respected advocate for policy changes that support working families and prevent housing instability. She speaks regularly at conferences and training sessions, sharing her expertise with other professionals who work with families in crisis. Her friendship with Lila has deepened over the years, providing both women with the support and understanding that comes from truly knowing another person's heart and history. They celebrate holidays together, share parenting advice, and support each other through personal and professional challenges. Leo is now a teenager who volunteers with his mother's organization and plans to study social work in college. He understands that his comfortable life today was built on his mother's sacrifices and his community's support, and he's committed to using his advantages to help others facing similar struggles. Mr. Griggs's partnership with Maya's organization has evolved into a model program that provides transitional housing for dozens of families each year. His properties have been renovated to provide safe, dignified housing at affordable rents, and his management practices now prioritize tenant welfare alongside financial sustainability. Sarah Griggs has reconciled with her father and works alongside Maya to develop innovative approaches to affordable housing and tenant support services. Their partnership demonstrates how people from different backgrounds can find common ground in their commitment to justice and compassion. The community that supported Maya during her crisis continues to thrive and grow, with new networks and resources that help families before they reach crisis points. The Christmas drives have evolved into year-round programs that provide everything from job training to child care to financial counseling. Maya's Resource Center has become a regional model that has been replicated in communities throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Her approach of treating families with dignity while providing comprehensive support has influenced policy at state and national levels. But perhaps most importantly, Maya's story has inspired others to believe that change is possible, that circumstances don't define character, that communities have the power to lift up their most vulnerable members. That individual resilience, combined with collective support, can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Every day, Maya meets families who remind her of her own journey from crisis to stability. She sees herself in the single mothers who work multiple jobs but still can't afford rent. She recognizes Leo in the children who worry about their family's security but try to protect their parents from knowing how much they understand. And every day, Maya has the privilege of helping these families see possibilities they hadn't considered, of connecting them with resources and opportunities that can change the trajectory of their lives, of providing the same kind of support and encouragement that carried her through her darkest moments. Do you have a Maya Rodriguez in your community? Someone who's working desperately hard but still struggling to keep their family stable? Someone who needs not charity but opportunity, not judgment but support, not pity but recognition of their fundamental dignity and worth? Do you have the power to be part of a community network that catches families before they fall? To support policies and programs that prevent rather than just respond to family crises? To choose empathy over judgment when you encounter people whose circumstances you don't fully understand? Maya's story reminds us that we all have roles to play in creating communities that support families through difficult times, that we all benefit when our neighbors have the stability and security they need to thrive. That individual success is always built on community support, and that community strength depends on the well-being of all its members. If this story has moved you to think differently about poverty, homelessness, or the challenges facing working families in your own community, please share it with others who might benefit from Maya's example of resilience and hope. Stories like these remind us that behind every statistic about housing insecurity or unemployment is a real family with dreams and fears and the fundamental human desire for dignity and security. Maya's transformation from a desperate single mother facing eviction to a respected professional helping other families avoid similar crises represents the best of what's possible when individual determination meets community support and institutional fairness. Her story is both unique and universal, specific to her circumstances, but relevant to anyone who has faced seemingly impossible challenges or wondered whether the system truly offers opportunities for those willing to work for them. The judge who turned out to be her childhood friend provided not just legal mercy, but personal redemption for both women. Their renewed relationship demonstrates that the connections we make in childhood can sustain us through decades of separation, and that adult friendships built on shared history and mutual respect can be even stronger than childhood bonds. Lila's role as a fair and compassionate judge reminds us of the importance of having people in positions of authority who understand that legal decisions affect real families with real consequences. Her ability to balance professional responsibility with personal empathy illustrates the best traditions of judicial service. The community support that Maya received represents thousands of similar networks that exist in neighborhoods across the country. These informal systems of mutual aid and shared responsibility often provide the safety net that allows families to survive temporary crises without falling into long-term poverty or homelessness. Mr. Griggs's evolution from antagonist to partner demonstrates that even the most entrenched attitudes can change when people are confronted with the human consequences of their actions. His daughter Sarah's persistence in challenging his worldview shows how family members can influence each other toward greater compassion and social responsibility. The Pacific Northwest setting emphasizes how local culture and community values shape individual opportunities and outcomes. Maya's story might have ended differently in a community with less emphasis on mutual support and social cooperation. Dr. Williams's recognition of Maya's potential illustrates the crucial role that employers play in either perpetuating or interrupting cycles of poverty. Her willingness to hire based on character and potential rather than just credentials created an opportunity that transformed not just Maya's life, but the lives of all the families Maya would eventually serve. Leo's development throughout the story shows how children can emerge from difficult circumstances with increased empathy and social consciousness when their parents model resilience and community engagement. His mother's struggles taught him lessons about justice, compassion, and social responsibility that will serve him throughout his life. The year-long time frame of Maya's transformation from crisis to stability represents realistic rather than miraculous change. Her story acknowledges that overcoming systemic challenges requires sustained effort, community support, and some degree of good fortune, but it also demonstrates that such transformation is possible for people willing to work for it. Maya's professional success in helping other families gives her personal struggles larger meaning and social impact. Her ability to transform her own painful experiences into tools for helping others represents the kind of personal growth and social contribution that benefits entire communities. If you found inspiration in Maya's story, if it reminded you of the power of hope and community support, if it challenged you to think differently about the families in your own neighborhood who might be facing similar struggles, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the resilience and dignity of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Your engagement helps us continue sharing narratives that honor the complexity of modern life and the possibility of positive change. Thank you for taking this journey with Maya, for witnessing her transformation, and for considering how her example might inspire action in your own community. Remember that behind every headline about housing costs or every statistic about single-parent families is a story as complex and hopeful as Maya's. Every family deserves the kind of community support she received, and every person has the potential to transform their struggles into service to others. Maya Rodriguez's story continues today as she works to ensure that other families have the opportunities and support that allowed her to rebuild her life. Her legacy is not just her own success, but the hundreds of families whose stories have better endings because of the programs she developed and the compassion she demonstrated. In a world that often seems designed to divide us, Maya's story reminds us of what becomes possible when we choose to support rather than judge, to lift up rather than tear down, to see potential rather than just problems. Her journey from eviction notice to program director is a testament to the power of human resilience supported by community compassion. That's the real message of this story. Not that individual effort alone can overcome any obstacle, but that individual effort supported by community resources and institutional fairness can create transformation that benefits everyone. Maya's success made her community stronger, and her community's strength made her success possible.